Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Sherry Berkowitz, and I'm an assistant professor in the psychology department, and I'm glad to see so many of you are here for what's a very exciting night. And I wanted to introduce myself, let you know that myself, as well as my wonderful colleague and co-organizer, Dr. Bethany Barrett, in the Political Science Department, who's the director of the Loundy Human Rights Project. She and I co-organized this wonderful event, trying to teach you more about different issues and causes of wrongful conviction. And so I'm very excited to introduce who will then introduce our fantastic speakers for this evening. So, Dr. Bethany Barrett, thank you.
So I'm going to try to keep this introduction really brief, but it's very difficult given the two speakers that we have. Can you guys hear me? It's really very loud. Okay, I'll just try to do my normal loud self. So welcome to all of you. We're so glad to see such a great turnout for this wonderful conversation with two leaders in a battle against injustice in the criminal justice system. I'll more formally introduce Joey and Meryl in a few minutes, but I'd like to thank a few people without whom this series would have not been possible, and just briefly describe the work that we do in the Loundy Human Rights Project. I first and foremost want to thank Joe Loundy, who is my partner in all of this and the founder of the Loundy Human Rights Project, who made this whole series possible. And this is a program that's unique in the nation in the opportunities that it offers for undergraduate international human rights research. So any of you that are undergrads that are interested should definitely see me afterward or just drop me a line. Basically, we study several interrelated social justice issues, but our current focus is on miscarriages of justice. Students study the sources of wrongful convictions and try to identify reforms here in Chicago, and then we do a comparative study where we take a research trip and we go abroad to study the sources of wrongful conviction and the ways that it's been dealt with abroad as well. Also, when students get an opportunity to work on current cases of wrongful conviction, investigating those with the Chicago Innocence Project, and get to have exposure to experts like Joey, wrongfully convicted individuals like Daryl, who then gone on to become activists against wrongful convictions. And so there's this broad way that people get to engage in human rights research at a very early age in their careers. This series is also sponsored by the Department of Psychology, so I also wanted to thank the chair of the Psychology Department, Jim Shoga, who's here yet. You may not have gotten her yet. And of course, my wonderful co-organizer, Sherry Berkowitz, who is absolutely responsible for the great interdisciplinary shape that this program has, and it would not have been possible without her as well. We're set against the images of Richard Ross's Juvenile Injustice series here at the Gage Gallery. And the gallery, under the direction of Assistant Dean and Gallery Director Mike Ensdorf, has become Chicago's quote-unquote premier space for showcasing contemporary critical social photo documentary, according to New City. The exhibit is co-sponsored by the Mansfield Institute for Social Justice and Transformation, which is using this setting as a crucible in which to explore the problems around youth incarceration. And there's a whole series of these discussions that's taking place throughout the semester, the next of which is tomorrow evening, so I encourage all of you to attend that if you possibly can. The series is also co-sponsored by the College of Arts and Sciences, in which I want to thank especially Associate Dean Julie Rowan, and Dean Lynn Weiner. We're also co-sponsored by the Justice Council of the Center on Wrongful Convictions at Northwestern University Law School. Thank you also to Laura Janata in Public Relations and my graduate assistant, Ella Tesco, who's taking pictures in the back. Thank you, Ella. Finally, if what you hear here makes you want to know more, please join us for our future dates, which are listed on the flyer in the back. They're back on the side of the table with the food for wonderful swim pathways, so help yourself with that as well. Our next discussion will be on October 24th with Josh Pepper, who's the director of Northwestern Law School Center on Wrongful Convictions at Duke, as well as Terrell Swift, who's one of the exonerated Inglewood 4. Are the bishops exonerated yet? Exonerated? Fantastic. Okay. So a little bit more about our wonderful speakers today. Daryl Cannon's false confession after torture by police in 1983 led to his conviction for murder and a life sentence. He won reversal of the conviction, but was again convicted of his second trial. On appeal, Cannon's lawyers informed the court of 28 newly discovered cases of torture and abuse by the same Burge henchman who had tortured Cannon, and the court issued a landmark decision granting Cannon a new hearing at which he could use this evidence to show that this confession was tortured from him. The case was again returned to the trial court, and after a protracted evidentiary hearing that focused on the pattern and practice of police torture, the state of Illinois dismissed Cannon's case in 2004. After another lengthy legal battle, the Illinois Prisoner Review Board finally rescinded a 24 years after he was wrongfully convicted. Joey L. Mogul is a partner at the People's Law Office and director of the Civil Rights Clinic at Paul's College of Law. Her practice focuses on representing individuals who have suffered from police and other governmental misconduct in civil rights cases, and defending individuals in criminal and capital justice cases. Capital cases. Mogul has worked to seek justice for the Chicago police torture survivors for the last 14 years, which included presenting cases to the UN Committee Against Torture and the Human Rights Committee in Geneva, Switzerland in 2006, which I think is unprecedented, actually. So I'm hoping that she'll get to talk a little bit more about that. Mogul's practices also included representation of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people in criminal and civil proceedings involving police and prisoner torture, abuse, and misconduct. Mogul previously published The Deadlier, the Butcher, the Better, the state's use of homophobia and sexism to execute women in the United States in the New York City Law Review, and with co-author Richie in the Shadows of the War on Terror, persistent police brutality and abuse of people of color in the United States, in the DePaul Journal for Social Justice. So it's another neat connection, right, between international law, foreign affairs, and kind of local repression. Mogul has spoken widely on the state's use of homophobic, sexist, and racist arguments in criminal cases, and has devised legal training to counter such efforts. Mogul has also worked as an activist with Fear to the Left, the Midwest Coalition for Human Rights, and with others to challenge the death penalty, torture by law enforcement officials, gentrification, and supermax conditions. Mogul has a BA from Oberlin and a JD from the University of New York School of Law. Copies of Mogul's most recent book, Queer Injustice, the Criminalization of LGBT People in the United States, are available for purchase also at back for $10. So you can see Nella is sitting right there next to the door for those. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much for such a generous and sweet introduction. I would love to thank Bethany, and Sherry, and Joe, and everyone else, Laura, and everyone else here at Roosevelt for making this opportunity possible for what they're organized to speak today. It's such an honor to be here to talk about an issue that's so near and dear to my heart, and hopefully to set the stage to present to you one of the most resilient and powerful and amazing individuals who has survived some of the most heinous acts known to humankind and lives here to speak truth to power and to push for the cause of justice, and that's Carol Cannon. So I need to kind of put my track shoes on because I only have a few minutes to lay out the struggle for justice in the Burge torture cases. And what people may not know is that this has been a 30-year-long campaign for justice that has been mounted by the torture survivors themselves, along with many of their family members, lawyers, activists, and organizers. And I think as a result of all of people's efforts, we've been able to get this far in the cause for justice. But unfortunately, there's still more to be done. So with that, I'm going to briefly go through what this 30-year campaign has looked like. So just as a reminder to some people, the Burge torture cases involve the torture of over 112 African-American men and women by former Chicago Police Commander John Burge and white detectives working under his command. And this torture lasted almost 2 decades, from 1972 to 1991. Now, when I and others like me use the word torture, we don't do it lightly, we don't do it flippantly, and we are not exaggerating. The violence, the torture, included electrically shocking men's genitals, ears, and lips with an electric shock box or a cattle prod, as was the case with Daryl. Other individuals were suffocated with plastic bags, and then what the white detectives would do was they would punch or kick them in the chest or the stomach, forcing them to breathe out, and then suck the bag in so that they could realize that they were unable to breathe. Many individuals were subjected to mock executions, threatened with guns. Others were physically beaten, where they had telephone books put over their chest or their head and then beaten on top of the books. It would inflict severe physical pain, but it would leave no marks whatsoever. And in one case, that of Leroy Orange, one of my clients, he was anally raped with a cattle prod. In addition to this excruciating physical pain, countless numbers of individuals were denied sleep, denied access to bathroom facilities, and isolated for hours and hours on end. And all of these torture practices, both physical and psychological, were done in order to extract confessions that were then used against the individuals in their criminal cases to wrongfully convict them, and in the case of 12, to send them to Illinois' death row. And while we're here discussing wrongful convictions, I think it's important to note that wrongful convictions don't just mean whether someone is innocent or not. That is not what constitutes a wrongful conviction. What constitutes a wrongful conviction is whether the system was unfair, imbalanced, or somehow illegal in the way it goes about seeking justice, or in this case, seeking prosecutions and convictions. And it's our position, and it's a well-respected position, that in all of the torture cases, every single one of those individuals were wrongfully convicted, because it's illegal under state law, under federal law, and under international law to use a physically coerced confession against someone in order to convict them. In addition to the excruciating physical pain that individuals were subjected to at Area 2 and 3 police headquarters by Burge and his men, the torture survivors were also mentally and emotionally tortured. They were subject to racist epithets, racist slurs, and they were subjected to racist terrorism. Now, I never feel comfortable using these words, but I think it's very important to lay out what exactly was said and done in these interrogations, because it gets to the heart of the torture in these cases, which is all about racism. Several of the torture survivors were repeatedly called nigger throughout their interrogations. The electric shock box that was used by Burge and his men was commonly referred to as the nigger box. In one instance, a black man was threatened with being hung, which was a clear reference to the lynchings that occurred here in the United States throughout slavery and Jim Crow. And then often, these white detectives would taunt the torture survivors, and they would say things to them like, if you ever report that this torture occurred to you, no one's going to believe you. In essence, no one's going to believe a nigger like you versus a white police officer like us. And that's in fact what happened. In countless of cases in the Circuit Court of Cook County, despite torture survivors coming forward and documenting the torture and testifying to the torture in their criminal proceedings, not a single judge credited their testimony whatsoever. And instead, they